Everybody that is watching right now, I hope you've been enjoying Stoked From Home so far. These have been really fantastic conversations.
They're going by so fast. I
know,
can't even
right?
keep up. Hey, Hadley. Oh, you're on mute. But hi.
Hi.
What's up, Hadley?
It's so nice to see your face. Last time we talked, we did not do video, so it's nice to see you.
Yeah, super nice.
TJ. Look at that. Lettuce. I love it. You're muted, but...
Oh, I'm going to turn my dishwasher off. Hold on.
Okay.
Oh, it's so good. I love like life just being a part of these things now. Like you don't have to over plan, over prepare, just be real. All right. Promoting Renee to a panelist right now. And let's see, is Dio in here?
I don't think I saw him yet. Let's see. No, I don't see him. Renee and TJ, you guys are on mute if you're trying to talk. It's a fun little game that Zoom plays on us.
Yeah, unmuting Renee. What's up, Renee? Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. Grant Adams says, yeah, this is rad. Awesome. Grant is actually one of the guys that I met in, God, when was it? Like 2009, studying abroad in New Zealand. My good friend Grant from New Zealand. We've had quite a few adventures together. So Grant, good to see you tuning in, man. I hope you're doing well out in Washington. We need to plan something again. All right. Well, I guess we'll just wait and see when Nick jumps in. I know that he was planning on it, so hopefully he's here soon. But let's just start and go around and everybody kind of give a brief overview of who you are, where you are, what's going on.
Should I start? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Renee. I'm a travel blogger and photographer. I'm Australian, but I'm based in Seattle. And what's been going on? I mean, just a whole lot of staying home recently, as most people are probably experiencing. We were actually, my husband and I were in Australia when all this went down. So it was a little scary coming back to Seattle, but we're very lucky. We're home safe now. And yeah, we've just been quarantining.
Nice. What about you, Hadley?
I'm in Innsbruck, Austria. We just finished like the strict part of the quarantine and we're allowed to go outside now. So that's been really awesome. Yeah, I'm a professional big mountain skier, ski mountaineer. And yeah, it's been, I think that was 3 weeks of like really strict, just going to the grocery store and that's it. And now we can move a little bit. So I'm really happy.
Awesome. Oh, Nick.
What's up, gang?
You're using Arjun's Zoom account there. I didn't see you in the list.
He's got the like the premium version, so I had to snag it.
Well, thanks for jumping on. We're just going around the horn and doing intros.
I was watching on like the other link. I've got it all.
Okay. All right. TJ, what about you?
Yeah, I'm TJ and I'm a professional mountain athlete, skier, trail runner, mountain running, ski mountaineering, and a health and endurance coach as well.
Sweet. And Nick is pouring himself a nice ice cold glass of water. Just taking his time getting into this. Nick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Awesome. I'm Nick Dio, the token guy from New York City. I left New York City 3.5 weeks ago. I'm living now in South Carolina. I'm super excited to be here. Professionally, I work in marketing. I work at VaynerX, which is an advertising and marketing agency, new business development, and I help educate businesses on social and digital. What else do? I run an active apparel brand called Way of Life Athletic Company. There's the plug. And we make active apparel pretty much for the city dweller, though, not so much for the backcountry skier. So I'm actually really excited to be here because for somebody whose like perception of outdoors is like the West Side Highway in Manhattan, like I am like really like outside right now for the first time in a long time. So I'm excited to hear why, like, kind of how everybody else is adapting, because I mean, this is like, I'm like on a lake and I'm like losing my shit.
That's actually a perfect jumping point, because I think like the last time we talked to everybody here, like Renee, you had just bought a house, you were moving. Hadley, since we've talked, I think you like moved from Jackson to Austria, right? TJ, I think you moved as well. Nick, you left from New York and now you're in South Carolina. Like everybody has had some kind of transformation, like totally unrelated to the coronavirus, like, pandemic. Yet this is, I'm curious your perspectives on like the role that this has started to play within this, transition that you've already been having, or Nick, I mean, yours was more reactive to this, but it's an interesting POV nonetheless. So I don't know who wants to jump in first, but would love your thoughts on that.
I want to go last.
There you go.
Making this his own show. That's what he's doing. What about you, TJ?
Yeah, I guess since we last spoke, I was living in Aspen, and I've moved about 30 miles from Aspen down the valley to Carbondale. That's kind of a recent move for me, just last August, so not quite a year yet. But it's been interesting. I think at first for me, as like with a ski background, being farther from the resorts was a little bit difficult to conceptualize and understand in terms of like my day to day in the winter. But I kind of, when this whole thing happened, my access to like my training grounds are much better down here. So it's, the whole situation being in a more rural environment and a slightly larger town in terms of like space, like the valley is much wider here. So there's a lot more space for me to explore from my back door rather than have to get into a car and drive to a trailhead or, use whatever the public transportation services around Aspen are to get to various places to go skiing. I've actually found that for me, in being in this situation for, about like 8 or 9 months or so, it's expanded my perspective in the way that I kind of approach my day-to-day, like routine and life and habits. And I found it like really great. So I think for me overall, the situation has been more positive, especially of late, with the restrictions that we have in Colorado. Aspen was an original hotspot and did have for a time the most confirmed cases of COVID. So we were all a little bit worried, being that Carbondale is a community that has a lot of individuals who work up in Aspen, and we were thinking that that might end up affecting the people in our area. So far, everything seems to be okay. I feel pretty positive for the most part about my move in relation to where we are with the situation right now.
That's good. Good to hear, man. Hadley, how's things since leaving Jackson and now you're in Austria? Like what that transition and now being in Austria in a pandemic lockdown, how's that been?
Maybe similar to TJ, it's actually been quite nice for me. I think I get really sad when I think of the global suffering that occurs at the moment. But for me personally, I went through a really difficult year, losing my partner. And then trying to I think as athletes, our go-to is trying to be back as athletes and moving. And I think I had so much, and probably still do have so much trauma from that and from this year in general, that I spent last year trying to maintain a really high level of activity as an athlete, and my body was fighting that and I was stubbornly fighting against it. And so the lockdown honestly was so nice to just be able to sleep, which I haven't had really hard issues sleeping. So I found myself sleeping a lot and actually training a lot in a way that was healthier than what I was doing before. And it was kind of what I've been needing for the past year, was like a really quiet 3 weeks that I never gave myself. So it's been like so nice for me. But yeah, I wish it didn't come at the cost of,
We can still hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know where I went.
I know your video went away, but
there you go.
I hear you.
I feel really sad and heartbroken that it's come at the cost of like a lot of human suffering. But from myself personally, it's been like a really nice few weeks.
Kind of a forced reset.
Because I wasn't going to do it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Renee, how has this impacted the way that you are engaging your community or running your business? Like, I know that you very heavily in rely on just the digital environment of being able to tell stories through Instagram photos, videos, through your blog, through the newsletter. Like, has anything really hiccuped for you, or how is like community engagement and business in the middle of this?
Well, I mean, there's been pros and cons. Certainly, my business has been affected greatly by this, as it's nearly solely about travel, and no one can travel right now. So I usually travel about half of every month. I think last year I was away for about 50% of the year. It's always for work projects. So yeah, all those work projects are gone right now. And also that's what my content relies on in terms of not just my income, but also, being able to put stuff out there to the world on my blog or through Instagram, through email marketing, all that kind of thing. So it has been challenging in terms of engaging people, but at the same time, everyone's online right now and everyone's just really curious about what other people's home situations are, what quarantine looks like for everyone, how everyone's coping with quarantine. So in a way, it's actually a really good opportunity to engage people and to connect on a level that I feel like I'm not always able to do, because people aren't always so available and so willing to have conversations. And yeah, so there's pros and cons for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly don't think that we would have been able to put this day together if people weren't home and quarantined, and a lot of people are really sick of their streaming services at this point. They're like, I've watched everything, there's nothing new. So I think there's a really cool, if we can call it cool, opportunity to be creative and kind of pivot how we're engaging with those communities. And it's been really interesting to see how engaged they want to be. They're like hungry for it, hungry for the interaction, especially people who are, quarantined with one or maybe no other people, needing that like social engagement.
Connection, for sure.
Yeah.
Nick, actually, I mean, like with Wallaco, like you were doing Wallaco Wednesdays as like a primary way to bring people together in this group workout every Wednesday morning. And that was like a fuel for like really building that community to build your brand around. How have you dealt with, being weeks out of having that regular cadence of meetups to really like build this brand around people?
For sure. So first thing, Hadley, I'm so sorry for your loss. I think, it's just so many people are going through like really traumatizing stuff, whether because directly of COVID or not. And I just, I think holding space for like everybody who's going through something right now is super important. And Emily, like it is kind of crazy. Like 57 people are in this room right now, like watching this. This would never, ever happen like on a regular Saturday at 3 p.m. Like just wouldn't be possible. So I think those two things, like with kind of, perspective, a lot of perspective, I think. And Jonathan, to answer that question, I think, so for context for everybody, built a brand in New York City. Really trying to, what was the, most kind of physical manifestation of our brand. And we do these 6:30 a.m. workouts on every Wednesday morning. In the summertime, they're packed 250 people outside on the turf, on the west side, overlooking Tribeca and Lower Manhattan. It's gorgeous. And it was really the impetus of like how we started to build this kind of like groundswell, grassroots, like very reminiscent of November Project, but probably like a little less granola-y. And that just went away. Like that just completely disappeared. But we went online, like we you have to pivot, you have to find ways to bring people together. And what we actually found was that, we have an instructor or somebody lead the workout on our Instagram live, and we're actually getting bigger numbers because more people are able to access that from literally around the globe. So, we're seeing 300 people, 400 people tune in for a 6:30 a.m. workout or an 8 a.m. workout on a Wednesday, which is really inspiring. And we're having a lot of more people be able to experience the brand because of online and digital workouts. Does that mean that I would ever trade the physical for the digital? Absolutely not. Like never in a million years. But I think even this, like even what we're doing right now, it's just showing us we get really set in our ways. Like I'm being the token guy from New York City. I'm like, I'm never leaving New York City. Like New York, I am Queens Boulevard, and like for me to get out of
an entourage throwback.
And for me to come, and now be in South Carolina for almost a month now. It's been 3.5 weeks. It's, I think this was for very, very unfortunate reasons, but exactly the shakeup that I needed to help shape my perspective. And I think that that's exactly what COVID has done for a lot of people, is given them some real perspective.
A lot of room to think, for sure. TJ, you had just started coaching people as well, runners and anybody in mountain fitness, really. So have you pivoted your coaching into more of an online model? Or are you still keeping that up and seeing new ways to creatively, help people progress even in the middle of this?
Yeah. When I was on Stokecast in like 2018, wow. I had just, that was a while ago. I had just started kind of getting into coaching local athletes in Aspen. And since then, the business has evolved a lot. And we're actually I'm working with 2 other coaches now. We're coaching a community of almost 100 athletes. And so that is like a major component to my day-to-day life at this point. And the cool thing about that is we're finding that in this situation, a lot of people are reaching for community in a way that they weren't previously, and are building an appreciation for it. One thing that we weren't doing before, these lockdowns and the pandemic started was we weren't connecting with our athletes like live via Zoom. We've adapted that into our weekly kind of training protocol almost, and having 2 weekly 1-hour sessions of open discussion. And we're getting, maybe a quarter of, the total community involved in each one of these chats. So like 20, 25 people showing up to have open discussions about this. We're finding that that's been really powerful and unique. It's not only been helpful from a business perspective because it keeps the kind of glue and the fabric together of the business during a time where, like, initially we thought we might have people dropping out because of financial fallout from the situation. But we're finding like having that community aspect to the program and getting people together is kind of like very it's really interesting. Like a mutual support develops where athletes are accountable to each other in the process of getting a little bit better each day. And like coaches are, us as coaches, we're also accountable to each other to improving as coaches. So it's not just a coach and athlete relationship anymore. So that's been like a really cool evolution that's come over just the last few weeks, really.
More connection than ever, which is weird, right? Like we're all removed from each other. And so we're doubling down on ways to connect and how often. Like I've had a family reunion Zoom call last weekend, and it's like, when would I have talked to all my aunts and uncles and cousins at the same time, if not for like the prompt to plan something like that? So we have a question from Yuri here. It says, I'll direct this one to Renee. It says, for both brands and influencers in the travel industry, how have you changed focus if you can't promote locations in travel and tourism? Like, what have you changed your focus to stay afloat or relevant in the industry as it stands right now?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of all this, I did engage my communities and ask them what they wanted to see. And I did get an overwhelming response that people still wanted to use this time to plan trips, to be lost in inspiration when they see a beautiful landscape photo, or maybe some tips on their favorite national park or something like that. They still wanted to get that content, more of an escapism or looking to the future and being able to plan outdoor adventures and trips. So that's more of the approach I've been taking, is mostly centering content just kind of as usual, but being, good about it in the sense of, when this is over, take this trip, not encouraging people to go on adventures as such now, or to actually book travel, because there's risks with that, obviously. So yeah, just also incorporating a little bit as well of more home life. I think it's just a nice combination. It totally depends on your community and your audience and how they want to respond with what you're posting and the kind of thing they engage with. But certainly my communities have wanted mostly just post as per usual, inspiration as per usual, and a little bit of home life and a little bit of lifestyle inspiration. But it totally depends on what your community wants.
Yeah. And I think that is, we talked a little bit about this on the last panel, but these really more like human moments are coming through from brands or just people that you usually see as much more polished. And I think that's been a really nice side effect of the interwebs these days, as I call it. Hadley, I got one of your virtual care packages the other day. You doing some recipe recommendations and things like that. I loved that. And I thought that was a really creative way of staying connected with people and offering something of value to them. Are there any other ways that you're trying to be creative in that way? And what kind of brought that about?
Well, I'm sure like everyone else, you have these like feelings of, oh, this will be the time that I'll do all these things that are, I don't know, grandiose in thought. And then, like I said, for me, at least, it's been a really nice like reset time, and not a time for me to be pushing like all these other goals. But I still wanted to, so my original thought was like, oh, because one of my friends actually sent me a box of cookies and it was so nice. And I was like, maybe I can do the same. And then I went through the moral dilemma of like, well, like, is that unfair to like put more load onto a postal service that's already like probably overloaded and these people have to work? Or is it good that they're working? And like, I don't know, thinking too much about that. So then I thought, well, you know, I have been cooking a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people are sick of like the 10 recipes that they know offhand. So I thought I would just send a email out to like close friends and colleagues of like, hey, this is what I've made in the past few weeks. And maybe if you're looking for something different for dinner tonight, here's like all pasta options. That's been my favorite too, is like the comeback of gluten seems strong, which I really appreciate.
All those people that said that they're gluten intolerant are eating a lot of sourdough bread these days.
A lot of bread. Yeah, but I don't know. I think that's something I get really annoyed, or I was really annoyed this past year, of people that say like, oh, you have to be positive. Like there's always something positive you can take out of it. And I think rather it's like, and you can be positive, and you can also like grieve or be sad, whether it's about COVID or whatever else is going on in your life, and you can be positive. And so having a mix of like, okay, I'm going to be sad today about this, but I'm also going to try to like spread some love via email recipe form or whatever that is.
I think it's really interesting what just your thoughtfulness around like that. Will me sending a care package like negatively impact somebody's life because of the postal service or what? I think if, you know, one of the things this has prompted us all to think more about is like every single person in the supply chain of that supports our general daily habits, activities, consumption style. and be more mindful of where our food is coming from, and you know, and all the people carrying the packages everywhere, and like certainly getting us to think twice about like placing an order, or needing to ship, or going out when you don't need to, or, you know, it's been an interesting pivot for sure.
Yeah, and I think like, especially in the outdoor space, I think a lot of us do these activities. They're not team sports, they're individual sports. And sure, like when you climb mountains, you have a partner, or, you know, there can be other players involved. But in general, I think we get pretty in like this independent headspace. And for me, it's nice to recognize like the impact I have as a person is a lot larger than I think. And that's not my like impact as an athlete, it's my impact as a person, and recognizing how connected we all are in general in the world is really beautiful too, I think, as well.
Yeah, we're kind of going through this collective crisis. And I was saying to Jonathan the other day, every time I step outside my door to like go on a walk or go to the grocery store, I'm like feeling the weight of making a decision for humanity. And while I think at first I found that really daunting, I think I'm coming around to what you're saying, Hadley, which is like, no, this is my duty, and this is important that I'm thinking this way. And I hope that remains after this is all said and done. Just a thought.
Just a thought.
I'll
keep directing questions, but like anybody can feel free to talk out of turn and just jump in if you have something to say. Please.
I'm gonna mute myself.
So now we're finished, you know.
Right? No rules here. Nick, I know you recently started a running vlog. Basically, is it just running with Nick?
That's right.
Yeah. So just you out there on the South Carolina roads, man. How romantic.
Boy, am I glad you brought this up. So I just filmed episode 6 for my whopping 103 YouTube subscribers, which I promise you, I haven't gotten this excited about something probably since I got like my first bicycle as like a 5-year-old kid, right? So, and the reason why I'm so excited about this, and like this is no BS, like this is I'm not kind of like puffing this up. I think that it's always been kind of our duty to tell our story in one way or another. Like I would go to my grandma's house and she has a photo album for almost like every year of her life. And you look through the photo album and she'd be like, we had 33 cars and we lived in 13 different homes. And those photos are the way that she is able to depict to the next generation what her life looks like. And I think for all of us, we have all these interesting tools, right? We have Instagram, and we have YouTube, and we have Snapchat and Pinterest and you know, Facebook, and you know, all of these different ways for us to tell our story. Medium and for me, the creating more longer form video content has always been something that I wanted to do. But I always, as like this creative, I always like handcuffed myself to the thought of like, fuck, it's got to be like really cinematic, or like shit, I'm not like in like, you know, Aspen, or like fucking I'm at the Jersey Shore on the weekend, like what the hell am I gonna fucking blog about here? So, you know, this has always been kind of like my handcuff. And it's crazy to think, because I live in New York City, which, you know, arguably I would argue on one side of it is the greatest city in the world, and I, you know, I feel really passionate about that. But even then I would always weigh like, well, I've got work and I've got all this and I got to go to this dinner and this meeting and I don't have time. And like all of a sudden I'm like plopped in the middle of South Carolina where the nearest grocery store is like 25, 30 minutes away. And all I have is time. And I could drown myself in Netflix. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I'm a big Kevin Nealon fan, the comedian, the SNL, old school SNL guy. And if you watch he's got a YouTube show. I'm going to be a little bit long-winded here. I'm serious. Yeah, he's got this YouTube show called Hiking with Kevin. And it's fucking great. It's just, he goes on hikes, and it like the first 15 episodes are like garbage, like shaky iPhone, hasn't figured out, then gets a selfie stick. And he was like, I'm just going to start doing it. And he did this 2 years ago. And of course, like Adam Sandler and David Spade and Owen Wilson and, you know, really funny Kristen Bell, like really, you know, really funny kind of like A-list celebrities are on his show, but the whole premise is dumb simple, like really dumb simple. So I was like, you know what? Like, I'm gonna give this a run. Right? I'm gonna whip out my iPhone and I'm gonna, use the wide angle lens on my fancy iPhone Pro, and I'm gonna start my own YouTube show. And it's gonna talk through, like, as I'm running and I think about something from New York City, I'm gonna tell that story from New York City. And as I see something for the first time, like I saw a dead armadillo today, like unfortunately my entire Running with Nick vlog is gonna become like roadkill because that's all I'm seeing on my runs right now. But like, at some point, I'm thinking like episode 200 or 300, it'll get really exciting. And I think for me,
200 or 300.
It'll get exciting at 200 or 300. Yeah.
And I think that's the whole thing for me is like, we have this crazy responsibility to tell our story. And like what's happening in the world right now is unprecedented. Like it's like really, I mean, it's happened like two or three other times in the history of the world, and we are living through it right now. So for us not to tell our story while this is happening is, in my opinion, is inexcusable, and I would deeply regret it had I not. So my silly kind of fun YouTube show with 103 subscribers as of this morning, I hope everybody here plugs it and I get another 12 after today. But like that for me has not just kind of like given me like a sense of kind of like creativity and an added layer of like fun on my runs. But if not now, when is kind of the approach that I'm taking to it. So for me, it's been a big kind of creative outlet.
That's awesome. I want to really expand on one thing that you talked, when you talk about like the handcuffs of posting, right? Like you had this mental block that like something had to be cinematic or overproduced or you didn't have something to say or whatever like that. Now you're doing it, and nobody that's on here right now is a stranger to sharing our story, whether it's through Instagram or Facebook or anything. Like we all have a kind of a social presence, but at the same time, so many people that may be watching right now or listening later or just in general out there have those handcuffs that prevent them from actually going on that IG story and posting it or doing a YouTube vlog or doing anything that puts themselves out there, right? So I would love to hear any and all perspectives from you, like how you got to the point where you were okay. I know we just got, Nick's story was about having time to really express it and just say, screw it. And you looked to like hiking with Kevin as inspiration, but anybody like, how did you get to that point where you had the confidence to say like, I do have something to share and I'm okay like going live or putting this photo or video out there for people to see because I'm ready to tell a story?
I don't think there's ever a perfect time to start. I don't think anyone ever feels fully ready to share their story. I mean, maybe they do, but just in my experience and also talking with friends, there's no perfect time. I feel like you just need to give it a try and then see how it feels. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, one reason that a lot of people continue to do so is just getting feedback from other people, whether it be family member, a friend, or maybe a complete stranger, that you helped them in some way. You inspired them to maybe try hiking for the first time or to take their first solo trip or something like that. And getting that feedback just fuels you to want to do it more. And I think that's a really positive feeling. But I don't think you really are going to know how that feels unless you just give it a try. So yeah, you just got to do it.
I know, I feel like, I don't know if anyone wants to expand upon this, but I feel like this point in time has exposed, if there ever was a time to expose, if you have imposter syndrome or are worried about putting your story out there, I feel like it has exposed that within yourself, but also at the same time kind of pushed you to do it anyways, because people are trying to engage, they're trying to create community, there's a need for it, there's an appetite for it. And it's been really cool to see people who I wouldn't even expect to really start sharing things to do that. I don't know if anyone else has felt that way or seen that as a side effect of this global crisis.
I'll chime in because, from a coaching perspective, working with a lot of different individuals from different parts of the world on a daily basis, I'm seeing that people are, in a way, using this situation as an opportunity for self-discovery, and understanding that we're all multi-dimensional and multifaceted humans. We may have, we might be a big mountain skier, or, a runner, or, we love to travel, but those are only small pieces of a much greater identity. And, I think that people, given the space, are more willing to seek out other interests and develop new habits or passions, or and they're looking for that. And I see that on a daily basis when I work with my athletes. It's, for me, that's very cool. I think, taking something and going a step beyond it. I can put a post up on Instagram of me skiing somewhere, but quite honestly, that's unobtainable for most people. They might see that as inspirational, but for a lot of people, it's not really tangible. So whether they can understand it or not is one thing, but starting off on a journey, you need support. Whether, it's a running journey or getting fit for a skimo race, or just, how do I learn to spend more time and appreciate being with my family now that I don't spend all of my time at the office? Those are bigger picture things that my athletes are now bringing to me, in which, I can at least offer a space to be an active listener. And I think that's really cool. Given the opportunity that exists out there and the extra space, people are kind of diving into other things that they didn't think were passions or interests.
What's the most unique or strange or out there thing that any of you have tried or gotten into since you've been in quarantine here?
Well, we you touched on earlier that last time we spoke, we just bought a house. Well, it's been an extremely long process, and it's still not even renovated yet. As you can see, I haven't even unpacked any rooms. We don't even have a kitchen. So during quarantine, something that I've been learning is to essentially go back to the absolute basics with cooking and learn how to make food without a kitchen. So that's been an adventure in itself.
You're camp cooking. You're preparing yourself for when you go camping again.
Yeah, well, we've just essentially just bought a bunch of small appliances. So it's way more convenient than living in a van or being out camping, but still definitely just learning new ways to get creative with an air fryer, trying to cook the weirdest things. And so that's been a fun little adventure.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely more time to cook things and explore in the kitchen. It helps to have a kitchen, but that's awesome that you're being creative with that. Hadley, anything over there that, out of the norm for you that you've been leaning into during this?
I feel like I've been dancing a lot, and I don't know if it's because when we couldn't go outside, and the grocery store is so close to my apartment, a block and a half. So it's really I don't know, when you go from spending 8 hours a day outside to whatever, it takes you 10 minutes to walk to the grocery store, I found my body just needing to move. And so there's a lot of spontaneous busting a move, I call it. But otherwise it's been pretty much business as usual.
That's how I prepared for this day, is I actually just danced to the entire Maggie Rogers album. And
that was me yesterday.
Yeah.
It feels really good. It's a nice expression of being a human, I think.
I agree. Everybody should dance more. Just randomly, as you said, bust a move in your kitchen or living room or whatever. It's just fun.
Yeah, and there was a great I think it was a Dirtbag Diaries podcast where the guy that runs that, I might mess this up, but he was trying to show how he could be a different person than who he thinks he is. And so he practiced this epic break dancing dance routine. And while waiting for the bus one day with like the same people that has been at the bus stop for years, he like pulls out his stereo and like in the middle of the street does this one epic like breakdancing minutes, and then like takes the stereo away, gets on the bus, and never does it again. But it was just this like experiment, and I was like, oh, I feel like this is my daily experiment now.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
Identity. That's incredible.
We got to find that. Share it.
I mean,
That's a
Nick,
good one.
you've had quite the identity shift. You've turned into southern backwoods guy, not the token city guy.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
I think for me it's for somebody who's like, I think I used work and the act of being busy as a little bit of like a blockade from all other responsibility for like personal wellness at times, things like meditation and journaling, like responsibility to being a better kind of family member, unfortunately, like in a very kind of like being very transparent. I've talked to my parents more in the past 3.5 weeks than I probably have in like the past 2 years. Which is super sad, but and which is crazy because we can't be face to face. Like this is over Marco Polo or FaceTime, like almost like on a daily basis at this point. So I think that's just again kind of the perspective that this has all given me. But for me, I think it's just opened up my peripheral to be able to understand why you guys love the outdoors so much. This is crazy.
Yeah,
Trees are good for you, man. Yeah,
they are. You're gonna go back and you're gonna start looking for a new place in the city that's closer to Central Park and you're around some more greens. That's so good. Nick, I'm curious. Let's stay on you for a sec. With you've got one foot in this like athletic brand apparel world. You've got one foot in just general, business, whether it's consumer or B2B or, advertising, marketing. I'm just curious what you're seeing across like non-industry specific that is resonating with people right now.
I think that right now people are really looking for to like share in little wins. Like I think what's his name, John Krasinski, the Office guy, like his Some Good News. Like people are really like, and brands are really kind of latching onto this, but like sharing in little wins, empathy, and like compassion. So especially when it's not done in like a braggy or like, look how many masks we donated or look how much food we're supplying. Like when it's done in a real way, I think across the board in terms of like what's working, it's just people sharing in the little wins. And then I think it's just like over communication. Like when a brand or a business shows like that they're taking care of their employees and they've like restructured their entire fulfillment center to make sure that everybody is going to be put in like the best position possible. Like, people really rally behind that stuff. So, for us, we are kind of like hero product is compression shorts with sweat-proof pockets for your keys, cash, and credit card and phones. And like for people that are like they're not runners, like, our business is actually doing, pretty well right now, in spite of everything. And I just across the board, what we're seeing is this. Actually, this is what I want to say. Statistically, and this is probably maybe not too relevant for all the people at home, but statistically about 12% of all transactions in the US are done so online. I think that after this, we're going to see a sharp spike to about 18 to 22% that will continue to climb year over year. And if you were to compare that 12%, 11 to 12% in the US to, let's say like China does 36% of all of their transactions online. And the big reason for that has been epidemics like SARS in the past. So I think what we're going to see is a massive shift to people getting really comfortable to buying groceries online, to buying their goods and everything, day things online. So the direct to consumer space is definitely having a tipping point moment out of necessity.
TJ and Hadley, I'm curious from an athlete perspective, like how these conversations are playing out with your sponsors. Like how are they communicating with you right now?
Like for instance, for the North Face, it's really nice. We're having the bells are also going off. I don't know if you can hear that, but the North Face, we've been having weekly calls with all the athletes, and then like the heads of marketing, and Hillary Nelson, who's like our captain, runs them. And I think it reminds me that it's really important as an athlete to be picky about which brands you work with, because I know other athletes that are having a really hard time with the brands that they work with getting dropped or salaries cut. And it's so nice to be not only from a financial perspective with the North Face, who's, whether it's an athlete or a store employee, they're all getting paid per usual, but also just having that support group once a week where for an hour we can just log on and all share like the communication we have with each other and figure out how, as an athlete, like what our role is at this point in time. Because like TJ talked about the identity thing, like it is really interesting where it's like if your job is to be doing athletic things or to be traveling for you, Renee, and all of a sudden that's gone, it's like, who are you and what are you going to provide to your community if you can't provide what you normally do? And so to be able to have those discussions with other athletes that can relate, it's also really interesting because they're from all over the world. So you kind of can hear how it's going in different places. But I would say in general, I've been really impressed with the brands that I work with. And I think it's maybe also because in the outdoor space, like, I mean, the North Face uses it as like weathering out the storm. We're all kind of used to like suffering a little bit and like not a big avalanche saying is like go slow to go fast. And so making like really rational decisions, not being so reactive. Like if you just reacted to everything, if you were outside, like you would be paralyzed because there's just always things changing. And so I feel like a lot of these brands are reflecting those like outdoor ethoses of like moving slowly, making decisions. Like it took the North Face, I think, close to 3 weeks to decide how they were going to help. And I think that was smart in a way, because as you listen to all these things, like this isn't a sprint, like this is going to be a season of people being sick. And so, yeah, I think I've really enjoyed between like Smith and the North Face and Line, like being slow in the decisions that they're making and really thoughtful behind them. And also that they're all taking care of the people that they work with. And that's a big, I mean, I think that's what the Stokecast is always highlighted, is how special the outdoor travel community is we take care of each other.
Yeah, I think you're right in pointing out that, people in the outdoor and travel and adventure industry have a point of view that is, more accustomed to being comfortable in the uncomfortable than most, right? And whether that is that you are in the middle of the backcountry and a whiteout comes in and you have to like not freak out and kind of like stop for a second and assess, like, I know where I am and like I have the gear I need, etc. Like, or even if it's just like you land in a foreign country and you missed your connecting flight and now you're stuck and you have to figure it out, right? Has that happened? Anybody here? I'm sure.
Yeah.
And so I think there is something unique about the mindset of the people that are more drawn to our industry than not, and how to handle something like this. And it the conversations I think that we're having today are probably healthier than maybe some people having these similar conversations with their team or their business in different industries that aren't used to things being so up in the air and uncertain.
Yeah, and I think that exactly that, the uncertainty, I think we're really comfortable with. Like, you don't know if you're going to be able to climb that mountain or run or whatever. And I think for us, and or at least especially for me this year, this idea of control, like that veil has dropped strongly. And so knowing like, okay, I can't control what's happening in the world. I can control that I eat well, that I exercise every day, that I like do something for my like mental health. And other than that, like everything's out of my control. So I can see myself in conversing with friends that live in the cities. Like, I don't spend that much time saying like, why did this happen? Like, this is crazy, or this has changed, and why can't this be this way? It's kind of like, well, okay, this is how this is. And like, now what do we do? Like,
wow, I want to comment on a lot of that stuff because that really resonated with me, Hadley, and some of the stuff Nick was talking about the shifts in buying habits and online, everything's going online. You know, that also resonated with me on a different side of the pole as to what Nick was talking about. Gosh, my hope for, when we emerge from this situation and we realize that some of the systems that are in place aren't functioning properly, that we reach back out and engage with communities for, our day-to-day necessities, whether it's, groceries or toilet paper is a big thing in our valley that just got crushed. One thing that I'm doing is starting to get my vegetables from a local farm. And I know not everybody has the ability to do that, but that's something that I have the ability to do that I think has a far-reaching and very positive unintended consequences for the future. It is my hope that other people will start to look at other systems outside of just Amazon and these huge businesses for access to goods and services, whether it's engaging with like a local coach for support or working with a local, travel agency to plan your trip instead of reaching out to huge corporations. But to go back to the sponsor stuff, for me, it's nice. I think that I wish the brands that that I work with are doing the athlete chats. That's something that's super cool that the North Face is doing. That's something that at Microcosm Coaching, my business, we do with our athletes. I know how powerful that is. So like for you, Hadley, I'm like really happy to hear that you have that outlet because although I don't talk about my personal pursuits in that like space, they're more to like help athletes with their personal pursuits and to support them. For me, sometimes it's a good sounding board, and like brands like Dynafit, which is my main sponsor. It's nice to see them stepping up in a time like this to produce, face masks and garments for emergency and healthcare workers. I think that is, the golden standard of what needs to be done during this time. So I feel very grateful to be a part of a brand like that, and that resonates with my value system and kind of encourages me to, push out messaging in my, where I can to my audience that is in a similar way positive. Another thing that I hear from sponsors is like, now is the time to send it from your couch. This isn't the time to go big. And I think it's been nice when the brands that I work with put out that kind of messaging because it resonates with how I feel about the situation. And it encourages me to continue to do training runs out my back door, to not get in my car, to go to the grocery store less, to do things that really matter. It brings to light the importance of individual responsibility in a collective, global collective, more so than just your community. I think, if you spend enough time on Instagram, which I'm trying not to do very much anymore, but you see people are still out skiing, backcountry skiing. Nothing makes me more frustrated. I think it's a really poor and selfish choice. And there's people on the chat, spread that. My brands aren't supporting that. I don't support that. I think now it's the time to come together in solidarity for people who are truly locked in. I have athletes in Spain who can't leave their house to go for a run. I have athletes in France who are doing the same thing. They have 1 hour a day they can spend outside. They don't have the luxury or the privilege to get in a car, drive for a half an hour to a trailhead, to climb for, a 6-hour approach to ski, a couloir. That's nice that your personal risk assessment system says that that's okay for you because you're, a great athlete. But honestly, like, there are so many inherent risks to that, and there's so much of that is wrong. I wish people would, and I like to see other athletes stepping up and saying, like, now's not the time to go big. Reassess your decision making. Embrace local activities as much as you can. Stay home.
It's an important time to think about, like, how you use your voice, right? And what message are you sharing? Nick, from the other side of that coin, how are you thinking about, ambassador teams and influencers? Like, from a business side, like, how should brands and anybody who has a business that's tuning in and watching be thinking about how to extend their message via that channel right now?
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, by the way, there's some real athletes obviously in this conversation that have real sponsors, and it's been amazing to even just hear anecdotally how your sponsors have responded, and you applauding them and kind of being on the same team. I think that's so amazing. I think let's like kind of classify or categorize a little bit for the small and mid-market companies that have been massively disrupted and they're trying to figure out, how do I reach a larger audience? I think now more than ever is really the time to go and build a true ambassador program. Go find people that see the world the same way you do, and then give them everything that they need to be fully equipped to tell your brand story in a way that's authentic to them. And I think that, kind of because everybody's at home connected to a phone or, on the computer, kind of exploring, looking for the next thing. I think, now's a really good time to really double down on ambassador programs more than one-off influencer campaigns. I think if you can find people that really see the world the same way you do, now's the time to get in front of them. Like, for example, I had a great chat with a 19-year-old kid yesterday who runs a YouTube channel. His name's Zach Levitt. He's one of these kids who was like, fuck college, I'm going to get a van and I'm going to go running. And I love this kid. Like, he's 19 years old. He like reminds me of myself when I was younger. But I didn't take that big chance. He's now at home and he's got nothing to do because he can't go anywhere and he's a kid. But like, now's the time where I can reach out to Zach and say, hey, Zach, like, let's get on a phone call and talk. He wants to start an apparel company. I can give him some advice. And like, now's the time that if you're on the brand or the business side, you can actually reach people because that they're sitting at home and they have a little bit more time on their hands to answer that email or that text message. So I think now's the time to go in and build real connections with people that you would want in a truer ambassador program, not influencer.
Awesome.
That goes back to even what Renee, you were saying earlier about just like the ways that you're having even more time to really dig in and respond to those messages and go on those lives or like be more present with people. That's I think the culmination of all of this is like taking the time now to be more present with the communities that matter around us, right?
Yeah, and people are actually having real conversations now. Instead of receiving comments on a photo like, awesome, people are leaving paragraphs, comments, and they're wanting a response back. They're sending DMs, sparking conversation and having, conversations that might go on with like 20 different responses. And it's so nice to be able to connect on that level and to really get to know your audience and to really get to know what they want and how you can serve them and how, like, what's the real reason why they even engage with you, and really coming back to that. And yeah, I mean, it's an awful time for many reasons, but there are definitely positives to it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, we just hit our 4:00 mark and have to jump into the next panel. But TJ, Renee, Nick, Hadley, this has been such a pleasure having you all back into the Stokecast ecosphere here. So pumped that you're all doing well, first and foremost, and taking this time to, really rethink and revamp. And I know that you'll all be skyrocketing out the other side. if not already. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for setting us up, guys. This is awesome.